Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajakacharya Ashtottara Satashishi Madhistvangresha Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Shri Ras Thakur Ki Premzaka Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shivandama Dama Ki Navadvip Mayapur Dama Ki Purushtam Chatra Jaganapuri Dama Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jainitai Gopremanandi all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to the Lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Evam Shriloka Guruna. It's supposed to be 31 today. 32. Who's anyone in class yesterday? So that's 31. Okay. Well, I guess, who's got a device with them? Okay, we've got few devotees with devices, okay. Evam Triloka Guruna. Evam Triloka Guruna. Sandishta. Shabda Yonina Sandishta Shabda Yonina Sandishta Shabda Yonina Evam Triloka Guruna Sandishta Shabda Yonina. Okay, this word might be a bit tough. Badharayanashramam Asadya Badrayashrayamam Asadya Badrayashramam. Even I'm struggling with it. I've got it in front of me. Badrayashramam Asadya Harim Ije Samadina Harim Ije Samadina Harim Ije Samadina Badaryashramam Asadya Harim Ije Samadina Evam Triloka Guruna Sandishta Shabda Yonina Badarashramam Asadya Harim Ije Samadina Evam Triloka Guruna Sandishta Shabda Yonina Badarashramam Asadya Harim Ije Samadina Evam Triloka Guruna Sandishta Shabda Yonina Badarashramam Asadya Harim Ije Samadina Evam Triloka
Sandishta Shabda Yoninam Badaryashrama Masadya Harim Dije Samadhina
Vaishnavis. Evam Triloka Guruna Vaishnavis. Evam Triloka Guruna Sandishta Shabda Yonina Bhadayashrama Masadya Harimije Samadina Evam thus Triloka three worlds Guruna by the spiritual master Sandishta being perfectly taught. There's a few words in this first line which have quite a bit of significance in terms of the translation and what Prabhupada comments on in the purport. You often find that in the purport, Srila Prabhupada unpacks the words. He may not necessarily refer to them directly, but he seems to generally unpack the words and explain what they mean deeply. But this word sandishta, even though it's talking here about being perfectly taught, there are quite a few different meanings, and one of the meanings here that's obvious here is message. So the idea is that Uddhava was given a message to give to Nrsimha Rishi, which I'll explain a little bit later, but just to comment on that. Shabda Yonina, by one who is the source of all Vedic knowledge. Badriyashramam, in the pilgrimage site of Badrik Ashram. And Badrik Ashram is a very famous pilgrimage site, but not only that, it's a very famous ashram for rishis and sages. And reading the descriptions of Badrik Ashram, it must have been a very idyllic place. Because the word Badri, I don't know if anyone knows what Badri means. It means like berries or cherries. So there's a lot of berry trees growing there, or cherry trees growing there. And so obviously, because the sages, they like to live on fruits, just like fruits they can harvest from the forest, and also just drink pure water. So it was on the bank of the Ganga, and so it was, and they find these places idyllic where all the fruits were just growing naturally, and there's fresh water because that's all they needed, and a cow, they didn't need anything else. Because we see with the sages, like you see, like most people in this world, they're very busy making arrangements to have a comfortable life. So they can have, especially in this weather, they have a nice cold, warm house. Not a cold house, but a warm house, and warm clothes and stuff like that, and a car to drive, and internet, and etc., etc. So there's so many endeavors we have to go to in order to ensure that we have what we consider to be the basic necessities of life. But we see with personalities like these sages, Vyasadeva and Nrsimha Rishi, etc., these great personalities, they practically made no endeavor for any of these things. And they would find locales where they could live in such a way where they wouldn't have to make additional endeavor for the necessities of life. And we see in the case of some great personalities even that they wouldn't even have to make endeavor for clothing or anything like that, because people would bring them gifts. There's even the story of Mrigarari the hunter. When he became a Vaishnava, then he sat down on the orders of his spiritual master Narad Muni, and he just chanted the holy name, meditated, and then the people heard that this previously this hunter had now become a great Vaishnava, and out of inquisitiveness they came to see. And when they came to see, they just understood that when you go to see a sage, you bring gifts. So then all these people were bringing gifts, and actually Murugari, he said to Narad, he said, but if I take to this Vaishnavism, how will I maintain myself? How will I maintain my family? And Narad said, don't worry, I will do that. But not that he personally did it, but because Murugari became famous as a Vaishnava, then people were bringing gifts. So it's the business of these great Vaishnavas is they just sit down in one place and just focus on hearing and chanting. They'll study the Shastra, they'll chant the holy name, and they'll speak. They'll speak on Shastra. So this is what the activities that would take place at Badrik Ashram. And of course, they're not speaking some mundane topic. They're speaking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, next word. Asadya, reaching Him. Harim, unto the Lord. Ej, satisfied. This is a word that's in the Purushuk. Ej tvoje tva vayavasto payavasto dehova savita means satisfied. Samadhina, by trance. Translation. Shukadev Goswami informed the king that Uddhava, being thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of all Vedic knowledge and the spiritual master of the three worlds, reached the pilgrimage site of Badrik Ashram and engaged himself there in trance to satisfy the Lord. Responsively, please. Sukadev Goswami informed the king that Uddhava, being thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of all Vedic knowledge, and the spiritual master of the three worlds, reached the pilgrimage site of Badrik Ashram, and engaged himself there in trance to satisfy the Lord. Now, it's almost 2-page purport. I'm not sure if I'll get through it, but I'll do my best. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is factually the spiritual master of the three worlds, and he is the original source of all Vedic knowledge. It is very difficult, however, to understand the personal feature of the Absolute Truth, even from the Vedas. And we see there's a few nice verses which indicate this. Is the Vedeshu, what is it? In the Brahma Samhita. Thank you. Vedeshu dulabam adulabam atmabhakto. So it's saying through the Vedas, very difficult. Dulabam means very difficult, but actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur translated that meaning Vedeshu dulabam, that it's impossible to understand through the Vedas. You can't. Just by studying the Vedas, you will not understand the Supreme Personality of God. There's an adulabam atmabhakto. But it's only in this Atma Bhakto, by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, this is the only way you can understand Krishna. And this is kind of, I'm not sure how far I'm going to get the purport actually. This is really interesting because, as I was mentioning, that there's 3 specific words here, or phrases here that I think are really prominent. One is this Triloka Guruna. So, Triloka Guruna means that he's the guru of the three worlds. But yet we see in the previous verse how Krishna is saying Uddhava is not inferior to me in any way. So we see that Uddhava also has this role of guru, and he's a representative of Krishna. This is why Krishna is sending him to Badrik Ashram, because he sees that Uddhava is non-different from himself. And there's many places where this is discussed in the Bhagavatam and by acharyas. For instance, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Sakshad Haritva Nrsimha Shastre, that all the scriptures declare that the spiritual master should be worshipped as good as the Supreme Sakshad Hari. Sakshad means the same, non-different. So Sakshad Hari, he should be seen as non-different from Hari and worshipped in that way. Not that he is God, but because he's given his life, Prabhupada describes this in a letter, because he's given his life to canvass on Krishna's behalf, therefore he is seen or considered to be as good as God. And then there's another really nice reference in the 12th canto, 11th canto, where I'm not sure who's speaking. It says, Acharya mam vajani mam na kahichit na matya buddhasuyata sava deva maya guru. That it's describing there that one should not disrespect the Acharya in any way, but see him directly as myself, because he's the representative of all the devatas. So we can see from this pastime here, it's just stating that Krishna, he's the guru of the three worlds. But because Uddhava is his perfect, unalloyed representative, and in the previous verse is saying, why is Krishna saying he's as good as himself? Because he has no contamination by the modes of material nature. He's not affected by the modes of material nature at all. And he's simply dedicating his life to the service of Krishna. And Prabhupada, hopefully we'll get to it here, but this purport's really amazing. And if we don't finish it, I'm sorry, but I encourage you to read it. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada describes how Krishna gave the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And he completed the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita when he spoke to Uddhava. And if you read the Uddhava Gita, which is in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's many amazing instructions there. But you can see how it builds on the Bhagavad Gita. And as Prabhupada points out, it completes many of these instructions. So this point of Guru, I think, is very clearly being elaborated here in this verse in the purport, and the importance of Guru, how the Guru is seen as being non-different from Krishna, but not because he's descended from the spiritual realm or because whatever, no, but because he's given his life for Krishna's mission. And this is how one becomes Guru, because we see it's not just like an ordinary thing to become Guru, because when one takes on this position of Guru, one becomes, not by taking on the position, it's not just because you sit on the seat you become empowered. No, it's because one gives their life to canvassing on Krishna, therefore they're empowered to spread the message of Krishna consciousness. And we see that there's many nice verses. A nice verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that points this out, where it says, Krishna Shakti Vinanahe Tahara Pravatan. That only one who's being blessed by a Shakti of Krishna can actually spread the message of Godhead. It's not an ordinary thing. Because this message of Godhead is non-different from Krishna. And you consider, is if you give someone Krishna consciousness, or this Krishna conscious process, and they take up this Krishna conscious process, what does that give them? Especially if they achieve success in this Krishna conscious process, what does that give them? It gives them Krishna directly. And Krishna will then become their obedient servant. So it's not an ordinary thing that one receives Krishna consciousness. Toshan and Krishna Prabhu and myself were discussing this as we were walking here today. How, like Toshan was telling me, when he walks down here Tuesday mornings to give Bhagavatam class, then there's this fellow who walks past me fairly regular, not every day, but most days, and he says Hare Krishna to Toshan. Not a devotee, but he says Hare Krishna. That's extraordinary, that a conditioned living entity chants Krishna's name. Their life will never be the same. Their life is eternally changed because they've had this contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's just like, I give you an analogy to help you understand. In this microphone, right, what happens is, okay, this is all connected over through there by wires to this amplifier. The amplifier is sending an AC signal through the line here. Right? And as the diaphragm moves, it goes through a magnetic field. There's wires around there, and it causes the current to modulate, and it sends a different modulated signal back to the amplifier, which is then amplified and becomes sound. So if you pull this out and you touch this wire, what are you going to feel? That's so low voltage, it's like 3 volts or something like that. You're not going to feel anything, basically. However, if you put your finger in one of these light sockets, what are you going to feel? You're going to get zapped. What if you touch a high tension wire? One of these, what are they, like 100 and something thousand volt wires, the 3 that run really high? If you get hit by one of those, what will happen to you? you get turned to a pile of ash. Yeah? So you can see that the comparative, the magnitude of power from this to that to the high tension line, the ones that run on the big pylons. Yeah? And so you think of that in comparing us to Krishna. Although Krishna is unlimitedly more powerful than the power that's running in those high tension leads, but it gives you an idea of the magnitude, the order of magnitude. So when someone comes into contact with Krishna, they're coming, when they chant Krishna's name, they're able to directly come into contact with Krishna. So this is something that will just forever change their existence. They'll actually reawaken eventually. May not be this life, may not be the next life, it may take many lives. But because they have this contact with Krishna through the holy name, through prasadam, through whatever it is, it reawakens their lost Krishna consciousness. And it opens them up to the powerhouse of Krishna and the powerhouse of Krishna consciousness. It's just unlimited what they can achieve from that. And also another interesting verse that comes to my mind from this discussion is Guru Nasha Swazino Nasha, where in the 5th canto, the 5th chapter, where Rishabdev is explaining to his sons that one should not become, and he mentions all these different positions of responsibility: a spiritual master, a mother, a father, a devata, a king, a teacher, so many different things. One should not become any of these things. There's a proviso: unless you're capable of delivering your dependents from the cycle of repeated birth and death. So this is the criteria for being a guru, not that one has some big beard or whatever, or wears saffron clothes or anything. That's got nothing to do with it. That's all external, and none of these things matter. It could be a great kirtan leader, they might give great classes, they may give terrible classes, they may lead terrible kirtans. It's all external. What really matters is, are they capable of delivering their dependents from the path of repeated birth and death? And this is what makes them glorious, is because they're able, by their instruction, they're able to deliver us from the path of repeated birth and death. So this is one thing I thought was very significant in this verse. His personal instructions are needed in order to understand the personality of Godhead as the supreme absolute truth. Bhagavad Gita is the evidence of such transcendental knowledge in gist. So Prabhupada is saying there, it's kind of like a synopsis of this knowledge. Pretty amazing synopsis, and by understanding Bhagavad Gita is sufficient to deliver us back to the lotus feet of Krishna and to become completely free. Because we see, like in the Bhagavad Gita, if you go the journey of the Bhagavad Gita, you'll see in the beginning, Arjuna, on the battlefield, all kind of fired up. He's going to get out there and kill everyone, and so he's speaking harshly to Duryodhana, you're this, you're that, and it's whatever. And then Krishna, it's amazing what he does in the Gita. When he says, he asks Krishna, he says, please take my chariot, so I can see the enemy. And then it says, Bhishma Drona Pramukhata. Right in front of them. Could have been in front of anyone else. Could have been in front of the guys that he really hates. Could have been in front of Duryodhana, I'm going to get this guy, I'm going to crush him, or Karna, But no, what does he do? He takes him right Pramukhata, right in front of Bhishma and Drona. Why? Because he loved them. He was so attached to them. And then, and so he just fell to pieces. He just couldn't keep it together. And so then he drops his bow, which dropping his bow is also very, very significant. And then Krishna takes Arjuna through this journey of material, from being materially attached to the point of just, Kadashe Vacham Tavara, I'm going to do whatever you say. So we see, even though it may be the transcendental knowledge in gist, it's still enough to deliver one from this material world. But the Uddhava Gita goes into the same knowledge in much, much greater detail. So it's quite amazing. One cannot know the Supreme Lord unless one is graced by the Lord himself. And that's the verse I quoted before. Krishna Shakti Vinanahi Tara Pravatan. Unless you have this Shakti of Krishna, you cannot overcome the influence of this material world. You cannot go back to Godhead. This is the mercy aspect. Without receiving the mercy of Krishna, because that verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Brahmadikona Bhagavana Jiva Guru Krishna Prasad Kripa Poi Bhakti Lata Bij. By the mercy of Krishna, one receives Guru, and by the mercy of Guru, one receives Krishna. So the whole spiritual process, we're completely dependent on mercy. Mercy of Krishna, mercy of Guru, mercy of the Vaishnavas. So therefore, it's really important that in the spiritual process that we cultivate loving relationships. Coming from our material backgrounds, and Krishna describes this in the Gita in the 16th chapter, this one's my friend, this one's my enemy. That's material life. And we see that people are always competing in the material life. It's like, so many devotees I know have given up working because of the competitive situation in the work environment. It's like, they portray themselves as being friends to each other, but really what they're looking for is just a chance to climb on top of their head to get above them in the workplace, especially in the corporate world. In simple jobs, it's not quite the same, but in the corporate world, there's such a strong kind of mood of climbing the ladder to get to the top of the pile. One time Prabhupada was in Japan, and he went to Dai Nippon, who originally printed the Bhagavad Gita, actually after Macmillan. They printed it first, and then Dai Nippon. And Prabhupada was placing quite a large order, but he went there personally to negotiate. And I don't know if you've read this story, but Prabhupada was like, they made him an offer and he cut it in half. And at the end of it, they were honoured to have Prabhupada's business, even though they weren't making money out of it. But at one point, Prabhupada made his offer, that they were telling him what they were going to print it for, and then Prabhupada told him what he was going to pay. And so they went, all the big executives went out of the boardroom to discuss, and they left the junior executive behind. So Prabhupada, being a very, very compassionate, caring, and affable type of person, he then asked this, he struck up a conversation with this young executive, and he said to him, "What is your goal in life?" So this young executive, he scooped up all the business cards, because in Japan they put all their business cards out, and give them to the person that they're talking with. He scooped up all the business cards and put them in a pile, and his was on the bottom. And he took his business card from the bottom and he put it on the top. This is their ambition, is they want to be top of the pile. They want to be God. And they're prepared to do anything they can to achieve this. They don't mind who they walk over. They don't mind who they stab in the back. They'll in many cases they'll do anything, say anything to get to be top of the pile, because it enhances their sense enjoyment, and they feel, that, and like the ultimate sense enjoyment obviously is a sense of power, is that I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. And this is a completely demoniac mentality. But when we come to devotional service, unfortunately, when we come to devotional service, we bring so much baggage with us. And the devotional process is about kicking out this baggage and realizing that I'm just Krishna's eternal servitor. And as I was saying, we're seeing here Prabhupada's talking about how we need the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we also need the mercy of the Guru, we also need the mercy of the Vaishnavas. But if we have this competitive attitude, how will we achieve that mercy? Because we're going to see the other Vaishnavas as our competitors. But as Prabhupada's saying, or Krishna's saying, Sukadeva Goswami is saying in the previous verse, that Uddhava, he didn't see himself as anyone's competitor. Why? Because he's completely devoid of false ego. The false ego, driven by the false, bewildered by false ego, the living entity sees himself the enjoyer. Krishna says this in the Gita, sees himself the enjoyer in this material world. But actually, the living entity is eternally a servant. Jivera Supahoy Krishnena Nityadas. That's our position. But if we become overcome by false ego, and this is the point that Krishna makes to Arjuna, he says, if you hear me, you will cross over all obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. He's saying, by his mercy. It's only by Krishna's mercy we can cross over these obstacles. He says, however, if you do not hear me but act out of false ego, you will be lost. And that's the situation for everyone in this material world who's acting out of false ego, whether they're devotees or not. If they act out of false ego, they're lost. They will not understand the goal. So we have to, and the false ego basically is this sense of myself being the controller, myself being the enjoyer. And we need to understand that this is Krishna's position. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadirade Govinda, Sarvakarana Karana. So the Ishvara means the controller. Ishvara Parama Krishna. Krishna is the supreme controller. There's no controller that can even come close to competing with Krishna. Because as he says in the 10th chapter of the Gita, he says you should understand that all these glorious and wonderful creations, that all these wonderful and glorious creations, they spring from but a spark of my splendor. Just one spark. Now, to give you a comparison, you remember a few years ago we had these horrific bushfires here in southern New South Wales. Actually, they were happening in Mooloolaba too, which is, you never hear of bushfires in Mooloolaba. And it just doesn't happen. And so there was these bushfires all over the country. Now, if you imagine you take all... And I remember coming back from India and flying into... we came across... Because usually the flights from Singapore, they'll come across Central Australia. And then... was it coming back from India or coming back from London? I don't remember. But they come across Central Australia and they come into Sydney from the Blue Range, from the Blue Mountains. And... you could actually see the fire, and it was massive. And I remember when I was overseas, because I was concerned because the fires were close to Mooloolaba and that. So I was checking out the weather and stuff like that, and there was satellite pictures on the weather thing, and you could see the bushfire, you could see the orange glow from space. It was just incredible. So you can imagine, right? You take all these bushfires and put them together, right? How big that is. Huge. You take one tiny little spark, and that's this whole material creation. And Krishna's saying it springs from but a spark of my splendor. So, everything here in this material world we're aspiring for is nothing in comparison to the wealth of the spiritual realm. So you have to just see it like that, how like all these things I want: position, power, money, attractive partner, car, whatever it is, it's insignificant compared to what we get from Krishna consciousness. But as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would point out, you have to taste this to really understand it. And the only way you can taste it is by diving into it. You have to actually surrender yourself to the process of Krishna Bhakti, which is not easy, because we have the comfort of our years of existence in this material world. We have at least we think we have some degree of predictability. But as we've experienced in the last, what month are we in now? We're in May. So as we've experienced in the last 14, 15 months, there is no predictability in this material world except birth, death, old age and disease. So we've got this false sense of comfort, this false sense of security in this material world. But it's false, because at any moment, you're dead. At any moment, you can have a horrific accident. At any moment, you could catch a horrible disease. You've got no guarantee. You do not know what tomorrow holds. You do not even know what's going to happen the next minute. I mean, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to sit here and listen to the Bhagavatam class and the silly things he's saying and stuff like that. But who knows? We could be sitting here and a plane could be coming over, to land at the airport, and one of the engines drops off. Comes through the roof. You don't know. And this stuff happens. There was 2-3 years ago, there was a light airplane flying from Canberra up to here. And one of the propellers came off. Could you imagine how fast that thing's spinning? And it just goes sailing through the air. And unfortunately it landed in the forest. But could you imagine if that came through the side of this building? It just completely destroyed the building. Those things are big and they spin fast and they're heavy, so you have no idea of how these things could happen. Or, like the Chinese, they had their space station re-enter just recently into the atmosphere. It landed in the ocean somewhere, fortunately, but, there's 1/5, I think it was 4/5 ocean, 1/5 land. So there's 20% chance you could land on some land mass. So you just don't know. You have no idea. So anything we take shelter of in this material world is unpredictable, uncertain. But if we take shelter of Krishna, if we take shelter of the spiritual master, this is predictable. Krishna is always God. It's not like he's sometimes God, or maybe is, maybe isn't. He's always God. And if we take shelter of his lotus feet, then we'll be saved from this material world. Undoubtedly, Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, just to encourage Arjuna to fight. He said this, Tasmadagana Sambatam, Hritsanagana Sambatam, Chitmainam Sangasayo, Atishtoshta Bharata. Get up and fight. Get off the mental platform. Get up and fight. Do what you're supposed to do. And yet, to complete the transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhava. The Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill his mission and disseminate knowledge which he had not spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. Now this is kind of interesting because here in the verse it says Sandishta. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, he translates this in different ways. He gives different translations, but the one he focuses on is message. And he mentions that Krishna had given Uddhava a message specifically for Narayana Rishi. Because he said, and the message basically goes something like this, that I've descended here to perform my pastimes for a century and a quarter. Now that time's coming to an end, I'm going back to the spiritual realm. I've at Prabhash Chetra, I sent all the Devatas back to their administrative posts, by killing all the Yadavas and the Vrishnis and the Boljas and the Andakas, who were all, I think mostly it was the Vrishnis and the Yadus who were at Prabhash. But he killed, he arranged for them all to be killed because they were all the administrators, all the leaders of the universe, and also his personal associates. So he wound them up. He finished their activities, and he said, so the Devatas, of Prabhash Chetra, I arranged for the Devatas and other administrators of the universe to return back to their posts, and I also am going to return back to my abode with the portion of myself that Brahma prayed for, which is Narayan, and also unseen to others, a portion of myself will enter back into you, will return here to Badrik Ashram, along with a portion of Arjuna, who is Nara, and will also enter back into you. So it's kind of like, it's a bit mystical in a sense, And so he had sent Uddhava there with that message, because nothing to do with Badrik Ashram. That's not his kind of rasa, if you like. He went to Vrindavan. He met with the residents of Vrindavan. He had many, intimate meetings with Krishna's gopis, etc., like that. And so that's more his kind of mood, and also the Dwarka mood. But then, to go to Badrik Ashram, he'd never been there before. But Krishna hadn't been there. Other times when he comes, he does go to Badrik Ashram. Therefore, there's no need for Uddhava to go. But he went there with this message to inform Narayana Rishi that okay, time's up, I'm heading home, and because he'd never been there. So the word Sandishta, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur mentions a message that he'd sent this message, but also that Uddhava had received many confidential instructions. We see if we go back to I think verse 28 or 29 and earlier verses, it mentions how that Uddhava when he was speaking to Vidura, he was saying that Krishna had given him all the secrets of devotional service and how to return back to Godhead. So, and this is very confidential knowledge, which Vidura didn't. Vidura wanted to know, but then Uddhava said, no, approach Maitreya Rishi, and he will help because Maitreya is senior, and also I've been given instruction I have to go to Badrik Ashram. So he gave him a shortcut kind of understanding, but then he approached Maitreya, and we'll see as the rest of the third canto unfolds, this will be Vidura and Maitreya discussing. And so he gave him this confidential knowledge, which Krishna gave Uddhava this confidential knowledge, which he also wanted him to disseminate. He wanted this knowledge to continue. So again, this is Krishna's mercy upon us, because without Krishna giving this knowledge, and also this word Shabda Yonina or Shabda Yonishu, the same sort of thing, because Krishna, he's the source of all the Vedas, and it's explained also that he knows knowledge that even the Vedas don't know. There's nothing that Krishna doesn't know, because Veda means knowledge, and Krishna is saying here, Shabda, he's the source of all knowledge. Yonishu, Shabda, Yoni means like a womb. So he's the birthplace of all knowledge. Everything comes from Krishna. And Krishna makes this point, Aham Savasya Prabhamata, everything emanates from me, the source of all spiritual material worlds. There's so many statements in the Gita where Krishna's pointing out that there is no limit to his knowledge, there is no limit to his power. So here also we see that this Shabda Yonina is pointing out how Krishna knows all knowledge, and he imparted some of this confidential knowledge to Uddhava. The Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill his mission to disseminate knowledge which had not been spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. Persons who attach the words of the Vedas may also know from this verse that the Lord is the source of all Vedic knowledge. One who is unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by going through the pages of the Vedas may take shelter of one of the Lord's devotees, such as Uddhava. It's the same point. We have to take shelter of the devotees. And therefore, this is telling us we have to have loving relationships with devotees. Because, say for instance you have some knowledge that I want to know, some confidential knowledge, but we don't have a good relationship, or even like, I treat you like you're an enemy. Are you likely to give me that knowledge if it's beneficial to me? Unless you're, a greatly liberal person or a very foolish person or whatever. If the knowledge was harmful to me, you might give it to me. If we have such a relationship. But no, it's important for us to develop these loving relationships with Krishna, with the Guru, with the Vaishnavas, because it's by their mercy we can actually understand who Krishna is. We can actually understand the science of bhakti. And we see that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's a really interesting, so many interesting verses, but it says, Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan Mathura Vasishri Mathura Shari Sevan. Lord Chaitanya just explained the 64 angas of bhakti to Sanatana Goswami, and then he sums it up and he says, but of all these there's the 5 which are most powerful, and that even by being a little bit connected with one of these, one's pure love of Godhead can easily be awoken, even if you don't have any faith, which is quite an extraordinary instruction. Even if you have no faith, you're just a little connected. It means like someone can come here in the temple, even if they have no faith, and they come and see Radha Gopinath, their love for Krishna will be awoken by that simple coming in here. As long as they're not envious or offensive, they simply come in, oh, what's that? That can awaken their love for Krishna, even if they have no faith. So, but what I find very interesting is the first thing that Mahaprabhu mentions is sadhu sangha, the association of devotees. The association of devotees is so important. You cannot estimate or begin to understand how important it is to associate with devotees. Therefore, it's so important for us to cultivate loving relationships with devotees. Not, this huggy-kissy kind of stuff, but that there's genuine respect, there's genuine appreciation for devotees. Because the materialists, they think when you love someone, it means you want to have sex with them. It's got nothing to do with that. That's not love on the transcendental platform. Love on the transcendental platform, we see that Dadati Pratigrinanti Guyamakiti Prichiti Bhukti Bhojayataja Sadvidim Priti Lakshanam. These lakshana, these are the symptoms, pretty, of love. Dadati Pratigrinanti. What's that? Gone blank. No, but what's Dadati mean? No, that's giving gifts, receiving gifts, taking prasad, offering prasad, receiving prasad, and then guyam akyati prichiti, inquiring confidentially and revealing the truth. So this is how we have a loving exchange with devotees, but it's through association, by prasad, giving gifts, and also inquiring and speaking. That's what we see, and this time with the, what time am I supposed to finish, by the way? I'm completely, like in New Govardhan, there's a sign up there that tells you you've got to finish, Okay, I'll be finished by 9, guaranteed. What was I saying? During this pandemic, it's been a really interesting time because there's so many devotees now who are doing online classes, which is actually an offering of their love. It's their compassion, their love for all the conditioned living entities, that they're giving this transcendental knowledge. So as much as we can, we take advantage of that. So these exchanges are so important, and we see, like in the Upadeshamrita, these are just very, very important instructions given by Rupa Goswami. These are like very, very short statements which contain a lot of very powerful philosophical truths, and which will help us to, as Prabhupada translates, a nectar of instruction. These instructions, there's so much nectar in them, and if we follow these instructions, we'll be successful on the path of bhakti. The Brahma Samhita says that it is very difficult to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the Vedas, but he is easily understood from a pure devotee like Uddhava, or any person who's given their life to Krishna consciousness, anyone who's, as Prabhupada says, canvassing on Krishna's behalf. Taking mercy on the great sages who lived at Badrika Ashram, the Lord authorized Uddhava to speak on his behalf, because the sages were feeling, we haven't seen Krishna. That they wanted to have Krishna's darshan. Even Narayana Rishi wanted to have Krishna's darshan, but Krishna had no plan to go there. So taking mercy upon them, he sent Uddhava there. And as he says in the previous verse, he's as good as me. Unless one has such authorization, one cannot understand or preach the devotional service of the Lord. The same thing that this Krishna Shakti Vinanahi, Tara Pravatan. Without receiving the mercy of Krishna, one cannot preach. While present on this earth, the Lord executed many uncommon activities, even while traveling in space to bring down the Parijata from heaven and recovering the son of his teacher, Sandapani Muni, from the regions of death. Uddhava was certainly informed of the conditions of life on other planets, and all the sages were anxious to know of them, just as we are anxious to know about the planets in space. Uddhava was particularly deputed to carry a message to Badrika Ashram, not only to the sages of that place of pilgrimage, but also to the Narayana deities. Such a message must have been more confidential than the knowledge described in the pages of the Vedas. The Lord is undoubtedly the source of all knowledge, and the messages dispatched through Uddhava to Narayan and other sages were also part of the Vedic knowledge, but they were more confidential and could be sent or understood only through such a pure devotee as Uddhava. Because this is the point, it is because of this confidential relationship between the Lord and these devotees, their realization, that the Lord reciprocates by giving them more and more, deeper and deeper realization. So only through these devotees who have given their life to serve Krishna, their realizations develop and their connection with Krishna develops. Only through them can we also develop this same relationship. You can't, like Prabhupada would sometimes say that the Krishna conscious process is not for armchair philosophers. You can't just sit at home and read Shastra and think that you're going to understand the process of Krishna consciousness. It's not going to happen. You need to understand the Shastras through the words and through the mouth of a self-realized person. And this is, Krishna says this in the 4th chapter, Tadvidi Pariparatena Pariprasena Sevaya Upadekshante Gyananas Tatpadarshana. It says, Gyananas Tatpadarshana. The self-realized soul, he can give you knowledge because he has seen the truth. Even though the scriptures, they are presenting nothing but absolute truth, just on our own, because of our dull head, because of, Prabhupada would say, our head filled up with cow dung. We're thinking we're so smart, we're so intelligent, but according to Prabhupada, you've got a pea-like brain, and it's just filled up with cow dung. We're not intelligent at all in the spiritual sense. We may have PhD, MA, whatever, but it's just material science. It just means that you can manipulate material energy, you can make a phone. So what? Does it give you Krishna's number? You can call him up on your iPhone? No, it doesn't help. But it's only when we actually become realized through the devotional process we can actually understand the absolute truth, because everything else we're dealing with is relative and it comes and goes, whereas the absolute truth is fixed, it's eternal. Anything in this material world is temporary. So it's very, very important to understand through approaching a pure devotee. The next point is really powerful. Since such confidential knowledge was known only to the Lord and Uddhava, it is said that Uddhava was as good as the Lord himself. Every living entity can, like Uddhava, also become a confidential messenger on the same level as the Lord, provided he becomes a confidential himself by dint of loving devotional service. Did you get that? Every living entity can become as good as the Lord himself, provided you become a confidential servitor of the Lord through practicing the process of bhakti. So the thing is like, in material life we're very limited with what we can do, but in the spiritual life we can become on the same level as Krishna, practically, actually above Krishna. We see, like the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. He's carrying Nanda Maharaj's shoes on his head. He becomes a puppet of the gopis. He just becomes a plaything in the hands of his devotees. So the devotee is actually greater than Krishna. And this is one of the reasons Mahaprabhu descended, was to understand this confidential nature, this confidential truth about that clock is not working. It says it's 8:20. Huh? Oh, okay, there's another one over there. That's the one I can see. I can't see that one. Yeah. So every devotee can become a confidential servitor of Krishna. There's no limit to what you can do. Like sometimes it's described how, I think it's the Nectar of Devotion describes the different qualities of Krishna, and it mentions that the living entity can have, 85% or something? And it gives some percentage. I don't remember the percentage. Like Narayan has 60 of the qualities and 55 of the qualities. That's what he said. 55 of the qualities. But then sometimes it talks about percentages also. We can be so many percent of the Supreme, as powerful as the Supreme Person of God. But if you think of it, Krishna's unlimited. So what's any percentage of unlimited? 1%, 100%? It's unlimited. What's 1% of infinity? It's unlimited. So the potential, basically what it's saying there is the potential, our potential is if we take the process of Krishna consciousness. It's not us. It's because we're plugged into the process. It's just like, the wire has no capacity to electrocute anyone. Right? But if you plug the wire into the power station, wherever you touch on the wire, it has all the capacity of the power station. So it's the same in Krishna consciousness. If we connect with Krishna, we have that capacity. Not as Krishna, but it's almost the same. And we see, this is describing, Uddhava is considered to be the same as Krishna, because he's fully given himself to the devotional process. Such confidential knowledge is entrusted, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, only to pure devotees like Uddhava and Arjuna, and one has to learn the mystery through them, and not otherwise. One cannot understand Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam without the help of such confidential devotees of the Lord. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that confidential message must have concerned the mystery of his departure and the annihilation of his dynasty after the end of his appearance in the mundane world for 100 years. Everyone must have been very anxious to know about the mystery of the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, and that message must have been explained by the Lord to Uddhava and dispatched to Bhadrakashram for the information of Narayan and other pure devotees of the Lord. So, Prabhupada's just describing the message that he's narrating to Narayana Rishi and the other sages. Okay, I've finished. Any questions at all? Any comments? Yes, Brad?
going back to the point we were making where the chariot is in the middle of the battlefield and then Krishna shows Arjuna, like Drona and Bhishma, and there's affection there. And then if we go to the teachings of Queen Kunti's praying to only have her affection diverted towards Krishna. So how do we understand that? Should we have no affection for our kinsmen only for Krishna, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the reason Krishna went in front of Drona and Bhishma, because that was a block. That was a stumbling block for Arjuna. He couldn't overcome that affection. So he was making this arrangement so Arjuna would overcome the affection and fight. Because he knew that, in order for Arjuna to be successful, he had to kill Bhishma and Drona. Otherwise they wouldn't have been able to, carry out Krishna's plan of annihilating all these warriors. But just because Arjuna killed them, it didn't mean he didn't love them. When Arjuna was firing arrows into Bhishma, the tears were just pouring out of his eyes because he loved him so much. But see, the thing is, as I was talking before, like love in this material world is how can I enjoy that body? It's got nothing to do with seeing them as a spirit soul and how can I help them advance in Krishna's service, or how can I serve the Lord with them or via their instruction or anything like that. It's all simply about trying to enjoy the material body. That's not love. That's sense gratification. That's exploitation. We think it's love, but you look, young boy meets young girl. What do they want to do? They want to have sex. It means they want to enjoy each other's body. It's simply mutual exploitation. It's really all it is. But if we understand what real love is, real love is to help people understand who they are, to help people understand their eternal service of Krishna. Now this may, like, for instance, with your family, this doesn't necessarily mean you go sort of bang them over the head with the Bhagavad Gita. Because most of our parents just aren't going to digest that. This means you act in a way, or it can mean that you act in a way that at least helps them to have a favourable disposition towards devotional service. And I remember my mother, she when I joined ISKCON and shaved my head and started wearing those, she freaked out. She even told me, it's like, you don't come around here with your bald head. I said, okay, I won't come. And she said, no, you can come. And but then it was towards the end of her life, she said to me, she's actually, you're the only one of my sons who's worked out properly. But I never tried to convince her to become a devotee. I never tried to preach to her because I just knew she wouldn't digest it. But I just tried to be a good son and set an example of a good devotee. And that had its effect on her. So she thought nicely of an aspiring devotee of Krishna. So that's a gyata sakriti for her. So she's going to get benefit from that thought. So, and this is an important point. We see here, like someone like Uddhava is always acting in a way that's beneficial to others, and we need to do the same thing. Like, when you're dealing with people in this material world, you get so frustrated sometimes when you're dealing with things in this material world, your computer or whatever's messing up on you, cussing under your breath and stuff like that. But when people see that, what do they think? These guys are no different from us. What's all the fuss about? So that means we've failed. We've failed to present Krishna consciousness properly if we act like mundane people. But if we act like devotees, and I'm preaching to myself here too, I'm talking to myself here. If we are able to act like devotees of Krishna in all circumstances, then the impact we can have upon others is immense. We can bring about change in their life. It's just like you walk down the street here, like if anyone sort of looks at me, I smile at them and I say hello. I don't say Hare Krishna because they probably, what's that? They say hello, and then they think, oh, friendly person.